Folks, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the dumpster fire that is the US government's latest economic policy circus. I'm your host, the guy who's had it up to here with politicians playing Monopoly with your hard-earned cash, and you're watching Boss Economics World, the only place where we expose economic screw-ups with zero mercy and maximum sass. Today's episode? Oh, it's a doozy. We've got House Republicans in a full-blown food fight over Trump's signature tax bill, bond markets throwing a tantrum, and a national debt load that's ballooning faster than a hot air balloon at a state fair. Spoiler alert, it's all the government's fault, and we've got the receipts to prove it. Let's roll. Alright, folks, let's start with the headline drama. On Wednesday, May 21, 2025, House Republican leaders were sweating bullets, scrambling to save Donald Trump's signature tax bill from imploding faster than a bad crypto scam. Why the panic? Because their own party is a hot mess, divided over everything from Medicaid cuts to green energy provisions. And let me tell you, this isn't just political theater, this is the kind of dysfunction that craters economies, tanks markets, and leaves ordinary Americans holding the bag. Classic government incompetence, am I right? Here's the deal, House Speaker Mike Johnson is walking a tightrope, with only a razor-thin majority to work with. He can't afford to lose more than a handful of votes, but his party's hardliners, those Freedom Caucus types who think compromise is a dirty word, are throwing a tantrum over Medicaid and green energy tax credits. They want deeper cuts to safety nets for the poor and disabled, and they want clean energy projects gutted faster than a fish at a seafood market. Meanwhile, moderates from high-tax states like New York are screaming bloody murder over the state and local tax, SALT, deduction cap, which they just negotiated up to $40,000. And then you've got bond markets flashing red alerts, with investors getting jittery about America's ballooning debt. It's a clown car of economic mismanagement, and guess who's driving? Yep, the government. But here's the kicker, folks, this isn't just about a tax bill. This is a masterclass in how government meddling and partisan gridlock can take a sledgehammer to economic stability. And trust me, we're just getting started. Let's peel back the layers of this onion, because it's gonna make you cry, and not just from the smell. First up, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the US national debt. As of May 2025, the debt is sitting at a jaw-dropping $35 trillion, yep, trillion with a T. That's more than 120% of GDP, folks, and it's growing faster than a TikTok influencer's follower count. Now, Trump's tax bill. It's like pouring gasoline on a wildfire. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, estimates that this bill could add another $4 trillion to the deficit over the next decade, thanks to tax cuts for the wealthy, corporate giveaways, and, get this, proposals like a public offering for Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, which Trump claims could raise hundreds of billions. Spoiler alert, it's a pipe dream. Privatizing those mortgage giants would just dump more risk onto the private sector, setting the stage for another 2008-style meltdown. Brilliant plan, guys. And here's where the bond market comes in, waving a giant red flag. On May 21, 2025, Treasuries took a nosedive, with 30-year bond yield spiking to 5.10%, the highest since 2023. Why? Because investors are finally waking up to the fact that the US government is spending like a teenager with a stolen credit card, and they're demanding higher yields to compensate for the risk. A tepid auction of 20-year debt on the same day just hammered the point home. Folks, this isn't just market noise, this is the sound of a debt crisis brewing. And who's to blame? The government, of course. Decades of reckless spending, tax cuts without spending cuts, and now this tax bill mess, it's all coming home to roost. For you finance pros out there, let's get nerdy for a second. The yield curve is steepening, with long-term rates outpacing short-term ones, signaling fears of inflation and unsustainable debt. And don't forget, the Federal Reserve is stuck between a rock and a hard place. With inflation still hovering around 4%, thanks to government overspending and supply chain messes, raising rates to cool things down could choke economic growth, but keeping rates low just fuels the debt monster. It's a lose-lose, courtesy of, you guessed it, government mismanagement. Now, let's zoom in on the Medicaid drama, because this is where the government's priorities get really ugly. The Freedom Caucus hardliners are pushing to slash Medicaid spending and impose work requirements by December 2026, instead of the original 2029 timeline. Why? Because apparently, helping the poor and disabled is abuse, but handing out tax breaks to millionaires is just fine. Classic government logic. Here's the reality, folks, Medicaid covers over 70 million Americans, including low-income families, the elderly, and people with disabilities. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, cutting Medicaid funding by even 10% could kick 6 million people off the program, leaving them without healthcare in a country where a single hospital visit can bankrupt you. And those work requirements? Studies from the Urban Institute show they don't actually increase employment, they just create red tape that kicks vulnerable people off coverage. In Arkansas, a similar work requirement experiment in 2018 led to 18,000 people losing coverage, with zero evidence of job growth. But hey, why let facts get in the way of a good political stunt, right? And let's not forget the economic ripple effects. Medicaid isn't just a safety net, it's an economic stabilizer. When people lose healthcare, they delay treatment, get sicker, and end up in emergency rooms, costing taxpayers more in the long run. The CBO estimates that every dollar spent on Medicaid generates $1.50 in economic activity, because healthy people can work, spend, and keep the economy humming. But nah, the government would rather get it to fund tax cuts for the top 1%, who, let's be real, aren't exactly hurting. This is economic sabotage, plain and simple, and it's all on the government's doorstep. Next up, let's talk about the government's assault on green energy. The hardliners want to gut the Inflation Reduction Act's clean energy tax credits faster than you can say, climate change. Why? Because apparently, investing in the future is socialism, but corporate welfare for fossil fuel companies is just good old capitalism. Hypocrisy, thy name is government. Here's the deal, those green energy credits are fueling a jobs boom. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, clean energy jobs grew by 5.3% in 2024, outpacing the overall economy, and are projected to create 1.5 million new jobs by 2030. Projects like solar farms, wind turbines, and battery factories are popping up everywhere, from red states like Texas to blue states like California. But if the government kills these credits, as New York Republican Andrew Garbarino warned, it could end up killing projects all over the country. And he's not wrong. Bloomberg NEF estimates that scrapping the credits could derail $500 billion in private investment, tanking jobs and innovation just as global demand for clean energy is skyrocketing. Oh, and let's not forget electricity demand. With AI data centers, electric vehicles, and manufacturing onshoring driving a 20% surge in U.S. electricity needs by 2030, per the International Energy Agency, green energy isn't just nice to have, it's essential. But nah, the government would rather cling to coal and oil, propping up dying industries while the planet chokes. And who pays the price? You, the taxpayer, when energy prices spike, jobs vanish, and climate disasters drain the federal budget. Once again, government blunders are tanking the economy. Finally, let's talk about the SALT deduction circus. For those of you new to this mess, SALT lets taxpayers deduct state and local taxes from their federal tax bill. Back in 2017, Trump's first-term tax law capped it at $10,000, screwing over people in high-tax states like New York and California. Now, moderates from those states are holding the tax bill hostage, demanding the cap be raised to $40,000. And guess what? They won. But here's the catch, to pay for it, the government is either going to borrow more, hello, debt bomb, or cut spending elsewhere, goodbye, safety nets. Here's the economic reality, folks, raising the SALT cap is a giveaway to the wealthy. According to the Tax Policy Center, 85% of the benefits from raising the cap would go to households earning over $200,000 a year. Meanwhile, the bottom 60% of earners get peanuts. So, while the government pats itself on the back for helping the middle class, it's really just funneling more cash to the top, all while piling on debt that future generations, you know, your kids, will have to pay off. And don't forget, if the 2017 tax law expires at the end of 2025, the SALT cap goes away entirely, making this whole fight pointless. But hey, why plan ahead when you can just kick the can down the road, right? Classic government. Alright, folks, let's tie this all together. What do we have here? A government so dysfunctional it can't even pass its own party's tax bill without a civil war. A national debt spiraling out of control, with bond markets sounding the alarm. Safety nets for the poor and disabled on the chopping block, threatening economic stability. Green energy jobs and innovation under attack, just as the world needs them most. And tax policies that favor the wealthy while screwing over everyone else. If this isn't a recipe for a recession, I don't know what is. And here's the kicker, this isn't inevitable. It's not like a hurricane or an alien invasion. This is a man-made disaster, courtesy of government incompetence, partisan gridlock, and a refusal to face economic reality. The U.S. economy is teetering on the edge, and instead of steering us away from the cliff, the government is flooring the gas pedal. For you finance pros out there, think of it like a leveraged bet gone wrong, too much debt, too little revenue, and a whole lot of risk. For the rest of us, it's simpler, the government is failing us, and we're all going to pay the price. So, there you have it, folks, another day, another government-induced economic train wreck. Here at Boss Economics World, we're not just here to rant, though, let's be honest, it feels pretty good. We're here to call it like we see it, the government's mismanagement is dragging us into a recession, and it's time to hold them accountable. For you ordinary folks worried about your wallets, and you finance pros crunching the numbers, the message is the same, this is a mess, and it's not your fault, it's theirs. Until next time, keep your money close and your politicians closer, because trust me, they're coming for both. This is Boss Economics World, signing off.